们没有时间难过，跌倒了再爬起来，抬起头，眼睛看向未来。民主是台湾人民历经无数的选举、几个世代人的努力打拼而累积的最珍贵的资产。政党竞争会有输赢，选举不论谁赢谁输，人民一定是最后的赢家。
Tsai Ing-wen taking responsibility for the opposition's victory in the country's midterms, as she did after the 2018 midterms. We ask, what's next for Taiwan heading into the 2024 presidential elections? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Yin Khvat. We're covering the latest news and analysis from a Taiwan perspective. Joining me in the studio to discuss this are Chen-shen, National Chengchi University Professor of Political Science, and Stephen Tan, International Policy Advisory Group Attorney and Managing Director. And I also speak with, from Taipei, Alexander Huang, Main Opposition Party Kuomintang, or KMT International Affairs Director, and from Long Island, New York, Sean King, Park Strategies Senior Vice President and East Asia Expert. Professor Yen, Stephen, a warm welcome to the show. In Taiwan's 9-in-1 local elections, main opposition party, the Kuomintang, clinched 13 of the 21 mayoral or county chief seats up for grabs, including the wealthiest, those on the northern tip of Taiwan, Taipei, New Taipei, Keelung, and now industrial hub, Taoyuan. In contrast, the ruling Democratic Progressive Party won only 5 of the highest seats, and yet back in 2021, the DPP had won all 4 of the referendums that opposition groups had called in order to frustrate DPP policy, thereby the DPP was dominating the political landscape. The referendums were on the construction of LNG plant, nuclear energy, allowing imports of US pork, and the timing of referendums. Stephen Tan, if I can turn to you first. So the result this time was similar to the 2018 midterm elections, but this time there wasn't the Han Kuo-yu factor. Han Kuo-yu was a candidate for the KMT that swept the country. So in your view, what happened?
Well, I think obviously people in Taiwan have sent a loud and clear message that many of the constituents are not very pleased with what's going on, within the current administration as we speak. Now, domestic issues, as opposed to sort of a China aggression or the Taiwan's future stance, really dominate the driving forces of the outcome of the elections. By that, I mean, COVID restrictions for the past 2 years, economic developments, the governance of at the central and municipal government level.
But on the economy, Taiwan has actually done pretty well during the pandemic.
Well, yes, but then you see the income inequalities get tightened up and worsened during the COVID period, and under the COVID lockdown and restrictions for the 2+ years, a lot of people are not very. Particularly, those who suffered the most are not particularly pleased with what the government has been doing. And the DPP candidate for the Taipei mayor, Chen-shen, happened to be the commander-in-chief. So I think there are lots of issues for the past year and a half or 2 years during COVID, although the numbers look good. The number combating COVID looks good, the economic development, all the numbers looks good. But you see that under the one man, one vote democratic system, when it comes to the midterm election like this, people have this wisdom to say that, hey, this has nothing to do with the future of Taiwan or how to deal with China in terms of its aggression and coercion. It's more about the domestic issues, about the income inequalities, concern over inflation, or even possibly the future potential recessions. I mean, those are all coming back to factor in in the election, and particularly in this election, the turnout rate is pretty low. It's 61%. 61% comparatively in the most mature democracies is not bad, but considering Taiwan's short history of the elections, you look at 2020 presidential election, the turnout rate is 75%. You look at 4 years ago, the midterm election or local elections, the turnout rate is 66%. This time 61, comparatively significantly lower. Why? Then people will ask why the turnout rate is low.
Let me bring, Professor Yan in. So Stephen mentioned many things there. One of them being COVID restrictions. Do you believe that the majority of voters, believe that the government could have done better on COVID?
Oh, of course. In the very beginning, I think Taiwan has done an excellent job in keeping, the border safe here in Taipei, in Taiwan. But after a while, people begin to think about, we did a good job, and all the other countries have experienced the peak of the wave in the COVID infection, and we should learn something. But we thought, I think we were just a little bit complacent. We didn't learn how to prepare for, the test kit. We have problem with a lot of these drugs and the immunization. So people begin to see, and today, the number doesn't look very good. We have about 1/3 of population, at least officially, have been infected by COVID, and then there are the mortality rate is a little bit high.
Is that compared to international comparisons?
Right now, right now.
But our, I guess you could say that our wave did occur a bit later compared to other countries. Japan, South Korea had very high.
But the high rate now for us right now, even though it's declining, but people will question saying, have you learned something from the other country? They have all went through this and have all gone through this. And then, the preparation right now, I think the rate is high. I lost some family members, not my immediate family member, but, kinship. So this is what a lot of people will feel. That's the COVID. But I think more important, like Stephen said, also, I think this is echoed by the international press, is that this is a local election, and if you only concentrate on the threat from China, and people probably said, this is not, the local mayor or county magistrate, they are not going to decide the cross-strait relations. They are going to concentrate on Taiwan's issue, domestic issue. So I think it is a little bit like wrong when you have President Trump in the United States and the Republican Party during the midterm. They are concentrating and say, well, the economy look bad. Always, American people care about the economy. So it's about the economy, it's about the low approval rate of President Biden, it's about the high inflation, but then they overlook the issue of abortion, right? So the same thing in Taiwan. I think the previous prescription might work for the last election, but not at midterm. You need to find out what people are concerned the most. I think this is where the DPP probably, overlook the issue here.
So now let's turn from Taiwan's democratic elections and increasingly relaxed COVID restrictions to China's zero COVID and a growing number of white ballot or white paper protests. There are real fears of how the CCP may react to what is becoming a national public uprising, triggered by the deadly fire in Xinjiang and 2 years of COVID restrictions. Protesters calling for Xi Jinping to step down have already been pepper sprayed. Stephen Tan, could we be on the brink of another Tiananmen in China?
Well, I think it's too early to say. If you look at what's going on for the past few days only, obviously there has been a commotion. Whether or not it's going to be escalated remains to be seen. The reason for me to say that is that this is a very different era compared with the Tiananmen Square, which occurred in 1989. Now China has undergone the Xi Jinping's third term under the digital authoritarian regime, starting from the Xinjiang experiment, quote unquote, on the Uyghurs, to now sort of the health code for the zero COVID policy, the lockdown in the major cities in China. It's really, really hard to create a commotion or any form of social movement or social unrest under the Chinese digitally authoritarian control. So what you have seen for the past few days may be a leash from the pressure that the local municipalities and the governments have been more than necessary or go over the guidelines or mandates by Beijing, the central government, to implement the strict COVID policy. And whether or not that will change, whether or not the zero COVID policy or the implementation thereof will be loosened a little bit so as to ease the commotion, that remains to be seen. But in any way, I would not do a direct comparison between what's going on right now to the 1989 Tiananmen Square movement, at least not right now, and I don't see that trend moving towards that direction.
Okay. Professor Yan, Stephen talked about how hard it is to mobilize in the authoritarian environment that we have in China. Now, we have the 8 points that Wang Dan, who was an ex-Tiananmen Square student protester, that he has put forward to protesters in China, precisely that, to overcome the difficulty of mobilizing. Professor Yan, what is your view? Stephen believes that there can be no comparison with Tiananmen Square. I ask you, are the conditions right in China for such a uprising, mobilization? And anything that jumps out for you from his 8-point suggestions to protesters, if we could bring that up.
Well, first of all, I think, I agree with Stevens. Way back in the 1980s, you have a political opening. You have, a lot of relaxation at the time, and including the leaders like Hu Yaobang and later Zhao Ziyang. So where the students, when they are protesting, they felt there are people in the central command there who are sympathetic to them. I think today, if you look at Xi's, leadership, his group of leaders, including the newly appointed Prime Minister, Premier Li Qiang, who is famous in Shanghai for locking down, right? So I think that's the policy Xi Jinping is going to have. That's not going to change. And also, Xi Jinping does believe in this kind of political stability, so he would not allow this kind of things to happen.
But isn't this precisely what has triggered the public uprising? The protesters had been pepper sprayed, they moved away, then they come back. And is this sort of force, that could trigger something, no?
Okay. At the time, I think Tiananmen also had the sympathy of international media, were able to cover I remember when I was teaching in the United States, I observed, like on CNN, just minute by minutes, right? But nowadays, you might have some reports on that. I don't think China will allow a comprehensive coverage of and once you don't have that, and it will be easier for China to bring that into control and probably allow some people maybe relax a little bit on that so that people will not continue to protest. But I don't think it's going to become a new wave of protests against Xi Jinping. At least I don't find any group of people or elite or intellectual in Beijing that will be, throwing their weight on this issue.
Stephen, the whole world is watching. We've heard of a BBC journalist who was arrested and beaten. How will this affect Xi's standing in the world? And should Xi, his people, use violence against the protesters? How might the US react to this?
Well, Well, first of all, I don't think China under Xi cares a lot, if at all, about the international reactions on what China does or doesn't. Second of all, I believe there will be some arrest, some crackdown, some more control, but simply because of the fact that this is not intentional. Letting out what you're seeing on the screens, for people in the whole world to see, that is not a coincidence. I think Beijing has sort of semi-intentionally to ease a little bit, and then to let the people release their pressures, so as then to take back the control by easing the COVID lockdown a little bit to strike the balance. So I'm not that optimistic about what you're seeing for the past 48 hours as sort of a new social movement against CCP, or urging for Xi Jinping to step down. I doubt that this is what it is. This might be just in a few days and everything goes back to normal, because at the end of the day, CCP under Xi in 2020, after the 20th Party Congress, is totally different from for the past few years, or from the past decade or decades. Look at what's going on in Hong Kong. Once you know that, you've seen what Beijing has been dealing with, what happened in Hong Kong for the past few years, then you have no reason to believe that this kind of social unrest and social movement, whatever you call it, the white paper or blank ballot or whatever that you call the movement, could be possibly successful, or anything near a success.
But if we saw a Hong Kong, if we saw those Hong Kong protests similar to Hong Kong in China, would that not cause international outrage?
You mean Hong Kong, right?
If it was on the scale of Hong Kong.
If it's on the scale of Hong Kong, then you think China cares about the outrage internationally? I think at this juncture, under Xi Jinping's third term, 2022 and going forward, I don't think China cares that much, if at all, about what's going on internationally.
Professor Yin, whether China cares or not, how about the international reaction?
But look at what happened right now. I mean, international community reacted to Hong Kong very strongly, and then afterwards, everything back to normal right now. So I think, from China's point of view, let them have their day for a few while, and then they will lose their focus. They will not be interested.
When you say everything's back to normal, what do you mean?
In Hong Kong means I can still use authoritarian way to crack down and control. Look, in Hong Kong, we don't have any protests really now.
Okay,
right?
but it has caused a much hardening of positions, let's call them anti-China positions, globally within the United States.
But then, I think people, for example, criticize China a lot, criticize Xi Jinping, authoritarian way of staying in power. But after 2022, after the 20th Party Congress, and then suddenly they pragmatically look at the issue right now is that Xi will be the leader for China for the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, and this is the guy we have to deal with. So they are still dealing with him. Look at all the summit meeting in Bali, in Indonesia, in the G20, and then later as well in the APEC summit. So I think China probably knew that, well, the Western media, the international community might be react, but they soon will lose their interest in this issue, and everything will be back to normal.
Well, allow me to just add one more. Even if the international communities, including the media, remain to have a high interest on what's going on in China, I doubt that it will affect the direction or the decision of CCP under Xi in terms of dealing with the commotions and social unrest as we see it. Whether or not that will accelerate the ease of the COVID policy, or the other way around, prolong the zero COVID policy, that remains to be seen. Because I do not see convincing evidence to signal at this moment the relaxation of the zero COVID lockdown. People say a lot about possibly after the party Congress, after the People's Congress meeting in March next year. But we don't see convincing evidence of that. Whether or not that zero COVID policy will ironically prolong, and that is an interesting point to watch.
Okay, so we basically discussed how the zero COVID policy may ease, but essentially no change. Now back to democratic Taiwan in the wake of its midterms. Earlier, I congratulated KMT International Affairs Director Alexander Huang on the party's win. He told me that the DPP's strategy to bring the China factor into the local elections had failed. Let's take a look.
I think 4 years ago, or may we say 2 years ago, during the presidential election, Taiwan voters and general public react to the external pressure by, voting against those pressure, or confronting or resisting the influence from the other side of the Taiwan Strait. But this time is a little bit different. We still need time to verify. We need to do some scientific research. But the general sentiment here in Taiwan this time is that when people realize that to express our defiance against external pressure through statement, keyboards, and ballots may bring a higher cost.
What would you say to the people who say that these local midterm elections are precisely that, are local? They're on issues that don't touch on, foreign policy and national security, and that would be for the 2024 presidential elections?
I think, it was the, opposition party tried to avoid to bring the local elections into national security debate. But the ruling party used national security as a campaign method, but it proved, not working this time. But given those comments and observations, I would say that in the next 14, 15 months, when Taiwan move into the next phase for the presidential campaign, the national security issue will come back, and the impact and the narratives would probably needs to be revised, and it should be different from last time 2 years ago.
Yeah, so speaking of the presidential elections, the primaries, of course, will start in a few months from now. So for the KMT, in your view, what are the priorities for the opposition, for the KMT, to build on this victory towards that 2024 election?
Our number one priority is to secure, cement, and make sure our supporters will not go away when we turn to national security related national campaign. And we will try to build on the sound foundation that we acquire in the midterm, and try to win back the control of the parliament. Of course, we know that we have another challenge is to find a good candidate or a good ticket, so they can play a bigger role in the January 2024 election. And of course, our goal is to win back the executive branch, and because we believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, parallel to Xi Jinping's third term, Taiwan will encounter a greater challenge that cannot be overlooked. And we believe that the KMT will have abundant of talent in national security matters, and can help Taiwan and protect, defend Taiwan through this troubling coming years.
That was Alexander Huang, KMT International Affairs Director. Now, the DPP has framed this midterms as defiance against China's increasing threats, reusing its 2020 general election campaign slogan, "Resist China, protect Taiwan. Stephen Tan, can you respond to Alexander Huang's assertion that Taiwanese people now know there's a cost to defying China?
Well, I think to start with, I think DPP must undertake deep reflections from head to toes on the outcome of this election. Nomination process and selection of candidates, campaign strategies and tactics, politics within the party factions, distance from the net citizen, supporters, and all the kind of things that have been undergoing the, reflections and discussions both within the DPP and its supporters. Now, whether or not the sort of the China issue play a critical role in this midterm election, the voters collectively have sent a message that no, this is more on the domestic issues of concern. However, the outcome of this election, in my humble view, has no bearing on the process and the outcome of 2024 presidential and legislative elections. This is loud and clear. It had this election, it has nothing to do with China's 20th Party Congress as Xi's third term, and China doesn't really care that much, in my view, on which political party runs Taiwan. At the end of the day, when you get down to the next big general election, which the primaries of the major parties will start right after the Lunar New Year in February next year, which is really around the corner. But at the end of the day, it is really the governance capabilities and the resiliency at a national level, particularly on how we in Taiwan handle potential crises facing external issues such as China and the domestic political divisions, that would dictates and determine the outcome of the presidential election, in my humble view, which I think is totally different from the midterm election this time.
Okay. Professor Yen, Stephen Tan says that China was not a consideration for voters, but Beijing, of course, has capitalized on the result. They are saying that the results mean that Taiwanese public opinion is essentially pro-Beijing now, and that they will work.
I think they used the word maybe pro-peace.
Pro-peace,
yeah.
Okay. And that they will continue working with Taiwanese to promote peace and stability, to fight independence and foreign interference. So, given only 6% of Taiwanese actually support being part of China, how dangerous is rhetoric like this from Beijing?
Well, I think Beijing has learned a lot from the past mistakes of saying something during Taiwan's election, which, result in the opposite, consequences they want. So I think they are trying to learn from the mistakes and keep quiet and say something that is not as controversial as before. But yes, I agree on the 2024 election. I think it's about time. I have a student who is writing on this since 1996 when we have direct presidential election. I remember that. I just came back to Taiwan, and I remember the DPP went through a presidential primaries. You have 4 candidates debating all over Taiwan in different cities. And finally, 2 came up above, and then finally Professor Peng got the nomination. I thought that was the best process we had, a truly democratic one, because you see the candidate debating, and you can find out their views, and then gradually, if someone is good, you find them actually grow during the debate, right, all over Taiwan. I just hope that in Taiwan, we can have, just like in America, a presidential primary. Everyone who wants to run, you can run, but the problem is we don't have a lot of votes within the DPP party member or KMT member. So why don't we have something like the US at the state level? It's an open primary that the KMT candidate and the DPP candidate, everyone can vote. And then the one on top of the KMT candidate will be the KMT nominee. And the one on top of the DPP candidate will be the nominee. And then if you support a certain candidate from the DPP list, right, You have so many running. You're not going to run away saying, well, I'm going to vote for this, really weak KMT candidate because that would be easy target for us. Because you want to make sure your candidate is getting the nomination. So I don't think we have time to do that. But that's what we need to do. Because every election, I think everybody complain now, every election, the rule is different. That's something we should change.
Stephen Tan, so this democracy, the democratic process that Professor Yan has been talking about, makes it easy for Beijing to have intervention, to have foreign interference in Taiwan's society process. Their statement where they say they will continue to work with Taiwanese, what does this mean? What's the levels of interference that we are experiencing?
Well, I think we have been and will continue to be very cautious and mindful of the China's influence on Taiwan's politics, particularly in the election seasons. The cyber attacks, the misinformation, the sort of the under-table campaigns. There are some rumors, there are some real evidence here and there, pre-election, during the election, or even post-election. You will see that phenomena will get escalated, starting from just right now, because 13, 14 months later, the presidential election is a bigger stake, a much bigger stake, not just for the 23 million people here, but around the world, and particularly for China. So I wouldn't be surprised that China will launch another warfare, not necessarily militarily, but more on the inferences. So I think we need to talk a lot between now and then on the national security issue and how in the Taiwan stance, and then I think there is no surprise that this will become the centerpiece of the campaign and the primaries and the pre-campaign discussions and rhetoric and all that. So I think, but on that note, just on what Professor Yan's remarks, and I think we need to applaud for Taiwan going through this midterm election. Just the past weekend, you see very peaceful, very smooth, no commotion. As soon as a couple of hours after the close of the voting process, the Central Election Committee announced the outcome, published in every detail. I mean, that is the big victory of Taiwan, going through the true democracy, and we're the only Mandarin-speaking true democracy in the world, and we should celebrate for that.
Okay, thank you. Still to come in the show, we look ahead to the 2024 general election and discuss which presidential candidates now stand the best chance of selection following the results of these midterms. But first, the international media contributed in framing these Taiwan local elections in the context of China, but is that how Taiwan's security ally, the United States, saw these midterms? I spoke to Sean King, Senior Vice President of Park Strategies based in New York, a former US official and a recent visiting fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore. Analysts in Taiwan have pointed out that the Taiwanese midterm elections are not a precursor for the 2024 presidential elections. What's your view on this, and how does it differ to the US system?
Well, if 2018 is anything to go by, it is not a precursor. But that doesn't mean that things did not happen on Saturday that won't affect 2024. In particular, the fact that the referendum to lower the voting age did not pass will probably hurt the DPP. But at the same time, Anne Gao's surprise win in Hsinchu will give Ko Wen-je just enough justification to run for the presidency, which will net help the DPP. The main difference with the US system is that, first of all, the US, the elections are actually real midterms because it's midway through a presidential term, not 3/4 like it is in Taiwan. But even though you're voting locally for your local representative in Congress or in the Senate, whoever wins has a national position and a national impact. Where in Taiwan, you're voting for a local candidate who also only has local impact.
You are in the US and you're also an ex-US official. How are the results being viewed in the United States?
Well, sorry to say for Taiwan Plus viewers on this long US holiday weekend, not many people are talking about these elections. But for those who follow it, I would suspect, Washington has always seen Tsai Ing-wen as a very steady, calm pair of hands. And there may be some dismay that when the political game got a little tough in these elections, she may have played the China card unnecessarily, where cross-strait relations were really not part of the debate. But she only has 14 months left in office. She's still very popular. I think the U.S. is overall satisfied with how she's handled things.
So do you think the U.S., Washington, would see the results as a referendum on Tsai Ing-wen's China policy?
No, not at all. Blue and green polls, if I see it, supported the Pelosi visit, even after Beijing's histrionic overreaction afterwards. And her approval ratings themselves are well above 50%. So I think anybody who understands Taiwan knows that these were local elections about local issues. And again, going back to 2018, it has nothing to do with who's eventually going to win the next presidential election.
Sean, you're also an expert in East Asia. How much interest is there in Japan about these midterm elections?
Not too much as far as I can tell. I mean, again, contrary to what happens on the other side of the strait, the great news is that people in Taiwan actually can vote and that these elections happen on a regular basis. There may be some apprehension over the KMT doing well because historically the KMT has been somewhat less pro-Japan than the DPP, in particular when it comes to prosecuting and upholding Taipei's claim to Japan's Senkaku Islands. But again, anybody in Japan who really understands Taiwan knows these were local elections that have no impact on Taiwan's foreign policy. So for the most part, I think people in Japan will not pay these election results much mind at all.
That was Sean King, Senior Vice President of Park Strategies based in New York. Now, it's the second time Tsai Ing-wen has resigned from the DPP party chairmanship, the first following the 2018 midterm defeat. But in 2020, Tsai Ing-wen went on to win her second term in a landslide. In 2024, however, she must step down on term limits. Stephen Tam, the results of the midterms, do they increase the chances of Lai Ching-te, current vice president, to be selected as the DPP's presidential nomination?
Well, I think so. But first of all, DPP has a good tradition of, going through deep reflections after a big loss of the election. So that is what's going on at the moment. You have to go through that process, not just superficially, but talk about what went wrong, both in terms of the policies, nominations, strategies, tactics, or even some personnel issues. Now, after that, once this is done, I believe that there might be some reshuffling of the cabinet member positions, but that remains to be seen. And getting close to the Lunar New Year holidays, or right after that, there should be a mechanism for the selections, nominations, or primaries of the presidential candidates for the 2024. So I think there should be a process. And don't forget that between now and then, there will be 3 elections. First is to replace the seat, the legislative seat of Jiang Wan'an, who just won the Taipei mayorship election. And another one is in Hsinchu, and another one is in Nantou, and another one is in Jiayi. So 3 back-to-back elections between now and then will, historically, during that period of time, will play a critical role in terms of whether or not DPP will marginally come back a bit. So I think all taken into consideration, I think when we talk about the 2024 presidential candidates within DPP, that should be something that might be in heated discussions after the Lunar New Year.
So you're saying you don't want to talk about particular people, such as Lai Ching-te, Chen Jianren?
No, I think Vice President Lai stand a very good chance. Okay. But I think you have to go through that, that stages of the political developments as I just described. Then you will see some services of the viable candidates, including particularly the VP Lai.
Okay,
and then
I better bring in
go through that
Professor
process.
Yan. Apologies. We have 1 minute left in this segment. Professor Yan, so for the KMT side of things, Alexander Huang talked about, obviously, that needs to be, they need to have a ticket for 2024. So let's talk about some of the personalities here. What are the chances of Eric Ju, who is the party chief, and New Taipei City Mayor, newly elected Hou You-yi?
Well, I think he knew himself from the 2016 election. He probably should not be the candidate. If he was smart enough, Hou You-yi might be a better candidate, but Hou You-yi also has to face the same question Han Kuo-yu faced, right, in 2020, that you have been just elected, but even though this is second term compared to Han Kuo-yu was first term, but his vote from this time almost make us believe that a lot of voters in New Taipei City knew that he maybe want to go up again for try to presidential election. So they approved that by giving him overwhelming vote so they can send him to the presidential palace. I think Hou You-yi might have a chance. Other people, I don't see them right now.
Okay, so this might be a problem for the KMT. Still to come in the show, we discuss why Taiwan failed to lower the voting age from 20 to 18 years in line with other countries, and how each party should move forward into the 2024 general election. But first, our political editor Rath Wang spoke to the newly elected mayor of Pingdong County, Zhou Zhenmi, who becomes the first female mayor of Pingdong amidst the DPP stronghold of southern Taiwan. Let's take a look.
Magistrate-elect, your win is not only the first female county magistrate in Pingdong County in 72 years, but you were also the only female mayor/magistrate of the DPP in this election. How do you see your win in terms of adding value to female leadership and visibility for women in politics?
大家问说女的县长有什么样的特质？我想温柔、细腻、坚强，这都是女性非常非常重要的特质。那对于相关的一些批评，或者相关的一些指教，或者之前大家认为民进党还做得不够的，我们也会盘点。重新盘点来检讨，然后后续，我想屏东这台进步的列车不能够停，不仅不能够停，而且要加速高速的前进，因为现在是100年建设的重要关键。屏东的医疗平权到位了，全国第4家荣民总医院，屏东荣民总医院也已经正式营运。另外，高铁南延到屏东。这个计划、这个建设也是确定，旁边还有科学园区，科学园区也已经开始招商，所以我想种种的建设，攸关着屏东未来100年，所以更需要一个非常了解宪政、非常坚韧不拔、坚毅努力的女性，来为母则强，来带领这个屏东。
Professor Yan, however, the referendum to lower the voting age from 20 to 18 failed. You're a university professor. There were more votes, weren't there, for the yes vote to lower it, and yet it still failed. Can you explain why this was? And in your view, why did it fail to reach that minimum of 50% for eligible voters?
Well, first of all, if you look at the voting rate, right? Turnout is very low. I mean, so you look at the voting turnout, it's difficult to pass. Secondly, of course, the COVID restriction and other issues, like right now, I have my student, preparing for the midterm. Maybe, they feel academically, they want to do something better. But also, I think the most important thing is there are issues. A lot of people, I think older people look at the issue saying, wait, this is not for them just to be having the right to vote, but they can also stand in office. I think that's pretty controversial for a lot of people looking at the age of 18. Are they qualified for running for office? And that one has never been explained very clearly. Do we have any restriction on what level of office? Of course, certain office, we know there are age limit, right? But in the local area, do you want an 18, maybe 18 years old to be elected in office? I think that's the question. Not explained very clearly.
Stephen Tan, is that a concern, by the way, before you answer? Is there a concern that an 18-year-old could get into office if they went through the democratic process and was voted in?
Well, some commentators had mentioned that before, but I personally believe that the underlying reason for this referendum item not being passed is because of the fact that this is an election plus referendum reflecting the general attitude towards the current administration. Now, I'm personally deeply disappointed on the outcome of the referendum, which did not pass, because knowing that no political party at all openly opposed that referendum, but it still failed to pass. So I think the only reason that I can reasonably explain is that there's a long way to go for the policy analysts and the politicians and political parties to put through in the political movement and campaigning to get the messages across. Because voters are both sophisticated and also straightforward. If they don't like you, the items, referendum, election, or otherwise that you put forward, they will say no and against you. So there's a long way to go that we have to go through the communications processes and get the messages across that this is the right thing to do, and there's no major political parties opposing that, and you should vote to support that. And so maybe there's another round. Maybe it's going to tie it up to the 2024 presidential election for the referendum, but then it will be enter into effect for the amendment of the Constitution in 2026.
Yeah, I just want to add a little thing, because I checked with my students, and some of my students will say, no, 2018 is not the age to have real grasp of the political issue, and they rather wait. But again, I think the political parties all parties wanted to please the younger voters, but some of the younger people might say to themselves, saying, we don't want to spend time, we want to vote more sophisticatedly, but 18 years old is not.
Okay. Stephen, so very final question. If you could sum up in a very short way, the DPP turned the tables on the KMT in the 2020 presidential election. What do they need to do this time round to stage a comeback in 2024?
I think there is a deep thought to correct the wrongs, whatever they are for the past year or 2 years, in order to win the confidence of people in Taiwan, and that's number one. Number two, I can almost guarantee you that the national security issue, or more so, how to stand strong, how to handle the potential crisis from the external forces, and how to put, the political divisions of domestically together, and whether or not we have a leader that's more resilient, enough, that's capable enough to be a fair and good and capable representative of people in Taiwan. Those are the critical issues to come back.
Okay. Professor Yan, how about for the KMT?
I think the KMT just want to, first, in the next year, prove that they won the local election with good candidates. They try to implement some policies on getting some real result at the local level and bring back the confidence of people in KMT administration or government, and so they can use that to build on what's going on.